It is very big. The plan has been under development now for about 5 years. The world-changing events that happen are so powerful that our modern calendar revolves around the first century. You're not watching The Chosen or some other movie. You're actually in it and experiencing it for yourself. Well, good evening. It's good to be with you tonight. I have looked forward to this opportunity now for several years. It was December of 2017 when my wife and I attended a show in Branson, Missouri called The Miracle of Christmas. Some of you may have seen that before. Now, I have a background in media development, theatrical productions, and film work, but I was not expecting what I saw that evening. As I sat there, I watched a story that I had known since a child come to life before me on the stage in such a real and a gripping manner that the whole story that I had known became very real to me. And I looked around me and I saw 2,000 other people also taking in the same thing. And when we left there, I can take you to the very spot on Highway 65 where I was when God planted a vision in my mind. Now, I think in terms of pictures, it was a blurry image. I didn't quite understand what it was, but over the next 3 days, I hardly said a word. My wife thought something was wrong for me not to be talking. But on the third day, I walked in and I just started talking. And she's an artist, and so she started sketching what I was describing. And picture after picture, and things were becoming more clear, and I was starting to see what this was. And a few months later, we had developed a plan, and I will tell you in a few moments here what that is. But that night at Sight and Sound Theater there in Branson, Missouri, I realized the power of theater. And I'll show you in 35 seconds what this vision is.
All of history tells a story, and here you can be a part of it. The pages you've read, the stories you've heard, it's all true. And at this place, it becomes real.
Try that door!
It's locked!
That vision is a first century theme park that takes all of these things that we have known. Think about it. The first century is the world-changing events that happened are so powerful that our modern calendar revolves around the first century, BC and AD. And tonight, what I want to do is just briefly go over with you what this plan is. It has been 5 years now in the development. And I'll give you the overview. It is 120 acres. It is 3/4 of a mile tall and 1/4 of a mile wide. It has 5 complete cities, a Sea of Galilee, a Jordan River, the Dead Sea, and a massive Mount Sinai that stands 150 feet tall, 15 stories tall. Let's go through some of these here. Capernaum, up toward the north on the Sea of Galilee. It is the cultural center of the park. Capernaum is where you would get immersed into the culture that was in the Holy Land at that time. They were under oppression from the Romans and also from their own people. There was a centurion that lived in Capernaum. So the centurion's house is actually an Italian restaurant. There will be food throughout the entire park. You've got to feed people. And so it's an Italian restaurant that really gets you into what the lifestyle would have been of a Roman centurion back in that time. There's also a garrison where the Roman soldiers would have been stationed, that he would have been over. You can actually watch them. These are full armored Roman soldiers as they're doing their sparring and their maneuvers and their exercises, their workouts. But see, you're not just watching this on a stage. And you're not watching this on a screen somewhere. You're in it. You can go and interact with them. You just stay out of the way of the swords as they're flying around. But you actually get to go there and watch that right there in front of you. Now, I said that they were under oppression from their own people as well. Well, you had the Pharisees who were putting all of these rules over them. The synagogue that's in Capernaum, that was also built by the centurion. There is a number, actually quite a few things. The ruins of Capernaum is a three-dimensional maze, all these blocks and the rubble of a building that was there, three-dimensional maze that you can climb over, around, in, through, kind of a fun thing there. There's also a couple of brothers that lived in Capernaum. Their names were Peter and Andrew. You can go explore their house and see what the life of a lowly fisherman would have been like. It's also a fish and chips type of a restaurant. You can get you a bite there as well. Matthew, he was a tax collector. He also lived at Capernaum. So you go from one extreme to the other. There's the poor fisherman's house, but also Matthew the tax collector's house. You can go through his house, and actually what you're trying to do there's activities in everything. Most of it is not just static that you go and look at like in a museum. This is hands-on, and you get to do almost something at everything, every location. His house is a kind of it's a lock and key type of a arrangement where you are trying to find his treasures, and you get a clue here and you go there and into this room and that room. Kind of an adventuresome thing that you go through out there. Capernaum also has the boat docks to the Sea of Galilee. They are making by hand right there in front of you. They are making these ships. They didn't buy them from manufacturers. They made their vessels on the Sea of Galilee that they went out on. And you get to see that. You get to see the history of how they waterproofed them, all the timber that they used, the techniques, and all that went into that. But you can also put your hands on that too. But also, just over from Capernaum, there is what we call the weapons of warfare area. Now, this is a cool area where there is real live catapults and trebuchets that throwing big rocks, and you get to load your own catapult, crank it down, position it, aim it, and pull the release to try to fire it at a target city. Now, you saw an example of that there on the movie. Now, some of you you've been to batting cages. We have stone slinging cages where you get 5 smooth stones pulled from the river. And you get a sling, and here comes walking toward you a bear or a lion, and you get 5 chances to twirl your stone and hit him with it. Now, if you don't hit him in the kill zone, you might anger the animal, and he could come charging at you. There might be some excitement that occurs here as well. There's an escape city. Now, some of you may have done an escape room. This is an escape city that is under siege. You saw that one in the movie as well. And you have like 3 minutes to get out of the city. And there are special effects. There may be timbers and beams falling that rediverts you. I can't go that way. You got to go this way. Try that door. It's locked. There was a key in another door. I just remember seeing it. Run back there, grab that key, unlock that door. And in the meantime, there's rocks being thrown overhead, maybe fireballs from the enemy. Listen, we're not looking at this from an outside perspective. We're watching it on a screen. You're in it. You're doing all of these things. Now, the most exciting thing at Capernaum, though, is what I would say, you get to take a ride on the Sea of Galilee on these first century fishing vessels. And you can man the oars, too, if you're up to it. But also, we have devised a way to make a storm on the Sea of Galilee. You're not watching this as like maybe the Chosen or some other movie that they have Jesus and the disciples on the Sea of Galilee. You're actually in it and experiencing it for yourself. There's rain, thunder, lightning, the waves, and there's a whole experience that happens in there. And at every point, everything that is happening, whether it's with Matthew's house or it's the fisherman's house, whether it's the escape city or here at the storm ride, everything always, it's not just there for an adventure. There are messages that you are getting at multiple levels of truth, of things that'll help you in life, maybe the gospel. It's not just for fun. There is purpose and there's point in it. When you walk away from it saying, man, that was really exciting, but that really helped me. I got something out of that I can take home with me. Do you think that the disciples on the Sea of Galilee, after they went through that experience, had a life change? Probably so. You could get the same thing. Now, of course, you feel that you're safe, but there are so many elements in this particular ride that you literally think that something went wrong with the ride and you might not make it back to shore. It's going to be that realistic. Moving south from there, you come to Nazareth. Nazareth is the city of industry. It's where all of your ancient trades are. You're walking down the street and you're smelling the smells and hearing the sounds of stone carvers as they're carving away, and maybe potters and their pottery wheels there, which you get to put your hands on as well. You can get your hands into the pottery, kick a pottery wheel. There's iron working. There's a forge there. Where they're making all of these ancient trades. It all is happening in front of you. And at some of these places, too, you can even request customized material articles and so on, and they'll deliver those as well. That's something that you could buy. But they're not just doing it for the show. It is actually usable product and merchandise. But Nazareth, the city of industry, has all of these ancient trades and brings it all, makes it all real, puts you right there in the midst of it all. Moving on from there, you come to the city of Jericho. Jericho was called the city of palm trees. It's the city that the Israelites came to as they left Egypt and had the wandering in the wilderness. It's the first place they came to. They crossed the Jordan River and came to the city of Jericho. So there is a theater. The park has 7 theaters and amphitheaters all throughout it. One of them is here at Jericho, and you are literally watching in front of you as the Israelite army is marching. The whole story of Rahab and the spies, it's all played out, and all the truths that are presented in that, the scarlet thread of redemption, everything is in the story, and it's played out there, and then the walls start crumbling down. You're sitting there watching this wall in front of you, and it's an outdoor. And the king of Jericho standing up there railing against the Israelite armies as they're standing silent, not saying a word. And part of the wall kind of cracks and maybe a few rocks crumble off. And the armies there of Jericho and the king, they think this is kind of a strange thing that's happening here. And then another event happens, and this part of the wall crumbles, and that falls, and then a whole pillar of the wall falls, and one thing happens after another, and eventually you think, this whole wall is going to, oh no, come down, and I'm too close. And you're sitting right there, and get literal rock, some of the rocks and blocks of it, this is all engineered, everything is safe. But some of that actually falls into the aisleways around you, and then Israel goes in and conquers it. Puts you into the middle of the action. Like I said, you have Rahab the harlot's house there. I'll slow down just a little bit. Rahab the harlot's house, which has all of the truth that's in it. Now, she hid them in flax. Jericho was also known for its flax that it had. You can take some of that. There's rope making there as well. It's one of the hands-on things, using the flax fibers. That was one of the products of the city of Jericho back in that time. But Jericho, the whole region of Jericho, was known for its earthquakes. We have what's called the earthquake ride. And you are riding along and things are collapsing and it is shaking violently, and then suddenly the earth opens up below you and your ride plunge down into an abyss. And there is a whole adventure that happens down underground, but eventually it ends up in a dark room under the ground when you think, and things are crumbling all around you, and it suddenly gets still and a voice says, a booming voice, "Yet once more I shake not the earth only, but also heaven." And that sky dome in this room that you're at night, all of a sudden the sky starts shaking and meteors and things start falling to the... It's a whole adventure that just takes you and puts you right into the middle of the whole thing. But that's the earthquake ride. I'm not revealing near everything, because I'm not going to let all the cats out of the bag at one shot here. Jericho also has the spy adventure. This is taken out of the adventure from the spies that went in. And you are going through the streets of a darkened Jericho at dusk or at night trying to evade capture. And your goal is to make it to the tower and rappel down the tower. Some of you have done some rappelling or know what that is. You go down the tower as the spies went down the wall, let down by the rope there at Rahab's house. So that's the goal of that ride there. But there's everything throughout that I'm not going to get into. That is Jericho. And now coming down from Jericho, there was a man. He was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. And he passed by an area there and he got robbed. And you might be walking along the trail, this roadway, this pathway that goes from Jericho from Jerusalem to Jericho. And you glance over and all of a sudden you see somebody just get beat up. And you say, oh no. Should I get my phone? Should I call 911? And a crowd starts gathering around, and the whole story of the Good Samaritan plays out in front of you right there. Just like an impromptu plays, and all throughout the entire park, all these little acts, all these stories that we know, all come to life, and they happen right around you in the midst of you. From there, you can move south into Shiloh. This is where the tabernacle is, a full-size tabernacle that has all of the furnishings that was back as it was in the wilderness there. And this is the only thing that will be open on Sunday afternoons, and it'll be free of charge. The tabernacle is completely free of charge. And a priest will take you through all of the ordinances that they had, all the meanings, all the truths that were in it, from the sockets of silver that were holding up the curtain that went around to the furnishings of the tabernacle, the candlestick, the table of showbread, the Holy of Holies, all of those things. And he's explaining all of that and what it all meant and bringing out all of the truth of what that meant in this worship system back in the wilderness. There's also a pillar of fire at night. There's a cloud by day. How are we going to do that? You'll just have to come and see. It's going to be pretty neat. But it will be very realistic. All throughout the entire park, one of the major goals is, how did they do that? All right, if you can move from there, you come to Samaria. Samaria is the hill country. Samaria is where Ahab's palace is. Ahab's ivory palace is actually a theater. And it plays out similar to what I had seen, but in smaller scales. It plays out these dramas and stories taken from history, from the Bible. Samaria is also where Jacob's well was, where Jesus met with the woman at Samaria. And there's a whole encounter there. There's a whole story. You get to experience and see all of that. There's Naboth's vineyard outside, right up next to Ahab's palace there. There is Simon the sorcerer. His house was also in Samaria. And you will get to visit his house too. It will not be a spooky and a dark type of a house that has this, but it will be something that is addressed and talked about and say, what is the truth about this sort of thing? And again, it won't be a dark and spooky thing. It'll actually be bringing this sort of thing to light of sorcery and witchcraft and so on. Not in an immersive way, but in a way that presents it in the light that it should be shown into. You see, there are also the Hill of Calvary. Calvary is the trail of Calvary winds up the hill, and it starts off in the Garden of Eden, where everything was perfect. Sin enters into the world. You leave the Garden of Eden and go through the valley of the shadow of death. From there, you go through Noah's flood, and then you encounter Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is where the law is given, and then as you're working your way up, you're going all throughout history from the prophets to the man's efforts to try to do to try to do good, and to try to get out from under this curse of sin that he's under. But have you ever noticed that if you put a cross up somewhere, like out here in Oklahoma, I understand there's a big cross out there. There's one down here in Branson. It seems like if you just put up a big cross, people just flock to it. And it's got some kind of a draw or an attraction to it. By the time you get to the top of Mount Calvary, if you didn't have an understanding of what the cross was, or you have some kind of a preconceived idea that wasn't accurate, you will know what the cross is all about. And because this trail will take you through everything that leads to why did Jesus come? Why was there a Messiah? Why was there a sacrifice? You descend from the cross there, you go down into an empty tomb. And then from the empty tomb, we speak of the resurrection, and then you can return back on your trail from there. Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the city of the great king. It is where the temple is. Now, I will stop and say something about the buildings in this entire park. If I were to ask you to draw me a picture of Bethlehem, you would draw me something that you have seen on a Christmas card, right? You would draw something that's got a domed roof and probably kind of a stucco siding and maybe some wooden posts sticking out the end of it and some arched doorways and maybe some stone arches or windows and so on. That is our perception of what that time era or this period would be. And while that may have some historical and archaeological accuracy, a lot of it really wasn't quite that way. Bethlehem was actually a very poor city, and they had just very rough buildings, rough dwellings. But all throughout the park, it will have this perception of what we would conceive in our minds of what it would be. So what I'm saying is it is not necessarily historically or archaeologically accurate. It is styled and themed so that it fits our modern appeal. If you were to go to something that was accurate, you would look at it and say, oh, this is kind of neat how they lived. But inwardly you go, ugh. Because really it was rough stone and timber. There wouldn't be that appeal for our aesthetics that we enjoy and that we appreciate today. So it is mostly centered around what our perception would be. So the temple there at Jerusalem, it is not necessarily the temple that won't be exactly like the Herod's temple, which was very boxy. If you've seen a model of it, it looks like a box with some things on the top of it. It's a very ornate building. It is also a theater. It's a 1,500-seat theater, also doing presentations and dramas and so on. There is many of the finer arts and the finer crafts are at Jerusalem that are not at Nazareth, such as silver and goldsmithing. Yes, you actually get to see real gold in front of you. And if security is tight enough, which is our big, tall Roman soldiers, and they're standing around you, you might actually get to handle what a shekel of gold was. Has anybody ever handled a shekel of gold? I mean, that's kind of a strange thing, but that was a real trading medium back in that day. You'll get to see what that is and perhaps even handle it yourself. There is the finer things like silks, as far as tapestries and textiles and so on. You have silk there, but there is also a lot of educated people and learned people there. This is where the scribes were. This is where the Pharisees were. So there is the scribe's house. The scribe's house actually takes you from the history of writing and then getting into scrolls and their mediums. It kind of takes you through the history of it all and how scrolls and writings were preserved and how they were accurately copied one after another and how the preservation comes. And as you can guess, this theme of the scribe's house is where the line of the scriptures came from and its preservation, its accuracy, and what's real and what's not. But it's a whole history and hands-on about what the work of a scribe was and how they worked there. Luke the physician's house. If you're into medicine, you might enjoy Luke the physician's house. Do you realize that they probably were doing C-sections back at that day and age? Now, the mortality rate was extremely high, but we won't get into the really graphic details of that sort of thing. But you will get to see the medical side of things at Luke the physician's house. It's very fascinating, in fact. We're not going to make it gross or anything. There is also the Tower of Siloam, the pool in the Tower of Siloam. It is a ride. It's quite an adventure ride, and its theme is the ancient construction techniques that were back in that day. How did they build things? How did they craft it? You realize it was all done by hand and very primitive tools. They didn't have big sawmills. They didn't have chainsaws. They had cranes, but they didn't have engines to lift it up. That was all done by manpower. So the Tower of Siloam is a ride that takes you through all of the history and the building techniques. And then at one point, your round platform that has 18 people on it, it gets picked up by a crane and swung out over the top of the Tower of Siloam and gently lowered down inside. So this probably would not be a ride for you if you have a problem with heights. But once you start descending into the Tower of Siloam, the unexpected happens. End of story for now. But when you finally plunge, yes, I let part of it out there, to the bottom of the tower, you will find yourself in Hezekiah's tunnels that were underneath the city of Jerusalem and the whole building of all of that. But the theme of the tower, everything, like I said, is a multiple layers. There is a construction layer of art, the historic layer of ancient construction techniques, but the Tower of Siloam is repentance. And after you've descended, you think you're going to die. Again, you think the ride has gone wrong. And after it is all calmed down, then a voice comes. Those 18 upon whom the Tower of Siloam fell and slew them. You think they were sinners above everybody at Jerusalem? Unless you repent, you shall all likewise perish. And then it goes on from there and goes into Hezekiah's tunnels and the building of that. Fascinating story of how that was all done. Outside of Jerusalem is Mount Olives. Mount Olives is where you'll get to sit and watch a complete rendition of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And his disciples will be handing out, yes, they'll be handing out bread from a basket that does not seem like it should have enough bread to feed everybody in it, but it just somehow keeps multiplying. But it is a dramatized story of the Sermon on the Mount. What I mean by that is it's not just him speaking, but it is also bringing out... maybe he's saying, a sower went to sow, for example. And there would be a sower walking along, a themed person, themed character. All of it comes to life. It makes it all very real to you. Not just a story that's back there, but we reach back there, grab that, and put it into its entire surrounding context so you get the whole picture in history. But Jesus finishes the Sermon on the Mount. He comes down from there. He's just been speaking to the crowd. He's tired. And so he comes to a fig tree there, and he's hoping to get something to eat. He finds nothing on it, so he pronounces a curse upon the fig tree, and then mounts on a donkey. There are themed characters all throughout the park. What I mean by that is first century dressed people who are interacting with you, who are talking, who are carrying on conversation of their own, maybe about, did you hear the latest news from, whatever, maybe Caesar Augustus or whatever, whatever's happening at that time in history. And they would literally include you into conversations and draw you into it. It builds on more than just a story that you've read in passing. It puts you there into that day and age. But he comes and you take palm leaves and you can, the triumphal entry is where we're going. He comes in through the eastern gate of Jerusalem there and makes his way onto the temple where he disputes with the scribes and Pharisees. You get to watch all of this. Now, if you came back to that fig tree a few hours later, it would be withered and turned brown and dying. How are we going to do that? Come and find out. But it makes it all come very real. There is also in Jerusalem the market street. If you've been to a country that has these markets, you know it is a very lively and a very festive atmosphere. It is a place where all of these vendors are trying to sell you their rugs or their articles or their pottery or whatever it is. They're trying to get you to buy all of these things. You get to go and experience that, walk along. All these things that are being manufactured and made throughout the park will be available there. You can bargain with them, but it's a very festive atmosphere. It's very colorful, very lively. But you get to walk through the market street there. But Jerusalem is the city of the great king. And one of the big attractions in Jerusalem is a 5,000-seat stadium, Roman stadium, where you get to watch 4-horse teams with stunt actors ride in a chariot race. Think Ben-Hur. It plays out in front of you. We're not watching Charlton Heston on a movie. You're actually getting to watch this happen right in front of you. But it's more than just a chariot race that lasts 5 minutes. There is actually an entire story that plays out. There's everything from a sword fight that is occurring and lots of things that happen that build up to this climax of the chariot race. And while that's not happening, if you are so inclined, you may take a ride in a chariot, step up with a Roman soldier and go for a lap or two around the stadium. We'll probably slow it down just a little bit from the vicious chariot races, but you get to do that. And if you also wanted to, if you're into the animals and the training, Solomon's stables are also in Jerusalem. You get to watch the trainers as they work with them. And Solomon's Stables actually has an entire history on working with animals from when they started with horses, their tack, their techniques, and And what they used them for, there's a very large artifact museum. They're very fascinating going throughout Solomon's stables there. Moving south from there, you come to Bethlehem. Bethlehem is the agricultural village. It is where all of the grains are, all of the fields. That's where vineyards are, and there are workers who are harvesting by hand using the ancient techniques and the tools that they had back in that day. They're harvesting it. You can actually go out and do that as well. We probably will not let visitors tread the great press there with their bare feet. You probably won't get to do that. But you get to watch them do that type of thing. They did clean their feet. I made sure of that first. This is the agricultural side of things, and it's where all the animals are. There is a sheepfold, and there you get to watch in front of you a shepherd defending his sheep from wolves. Wolves are a very trainable animal. You can get some that are if they're not pure wolf, that they're a wolf hybrid. That will actually be participating in this. They will be raising their hair, yipping, barking at him, snapping at him as he's defending his sheep from that. Now, he's not just doing that. You just swing a little stick around and then he's all done. He's actually talking to the audience, talking to the crowd, explaining what the life would have been like. They slept outside with their sheep. They had to defend the sheep. It was kill or be killed back in that day. And this was a life for them. Hirelings would all flee because their life wasn't in the sheep. And he will bring out all of the truths about shepherding and sheep and bring it down to a practical application in today. Also there, I know that some of you dairy farmers do not understand why anybody would ever want to milk a cow. But there are people out there who would love to just put their hands on and squish milk out of a cow. You get to do that at Bethlehem. And in fact, in the mornings before the park actually opens, you can come and watch the animals being tended, taken care of. There is a Jersey dairy herd; they are milking them. You can watch all of that. They'll also be milking them throughout the day, giving demonstrations, care of animals. Bethlehem also has what's called the shepherd experience, and as I said, the life of a shepherd is very different than what we understand, and all of that is brought out in the shepherd experience. Also at Bethlehem. We cannot forget this one. There is an inn at Bethlehem. It is actually a 2-story restaurant where you could sit there and enjoy a meal right next to a stone archway window that's open air to the village down below, and sit there in a winter evening and actually watch the Christmas story play out on the ground right there in front of you with other visitors around it. And then moving on from there, you come to the southern desert. You come to Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. Mount Sinai it could actually be a standalone attraction of its own. You wouldn't even need the rest of the park. Sinai has inside of it what we call the 10 Commandments, or the Commandments Activity Center. There are dozens of activities that take the commandments and make them into practical things that you do, practical applications, challenges, games. Not making a fun type game out of it, but making a challenge, I guess I should say, not games, but a challenge to keep the law, and then how you are going to eventually fail in the end. And some of that is a very intense thing. Again, there could be some heights involved for some of them, but I cannot get into all the details of it. There is so much that goes on in the activity that brings all the commandments and makes it real. That you go, oh, I wish I could have kept that. I wish I could have done that commandment. And then you realize what you're saying. Oh, maybe I really don't keep the commandments like I should. There is also in Sinai are the only roller coasters that we have inside the mountain. There are 5 themed dark rides. A dark ride is one where you're coasting along, and you're in a dark, you can't see anything. All you know is you're moving along, and it opens up into a room it has a certain experience to it, or a certain theme that it's portraying. And what this does is each ride takes you through 2 of the commandments. For example, maybe there's one of thou shalt not steal, and you hear that in the darkness, and then you break out into a store aisle. Your cart is coasting down a store aisle, and you see a kid sneaking something into his pocket. We take these commandments and we put them into practical daily applications of what people actually do and what the commandments say about that. There's also one other dark ride, and that is the Exodus ride. That is the one that takes you from, you are riding in an ox cart, and you are going through the history of Israel, leaving out of Egypt, and their wanderings in the desert after they came to Mount Sinai. It takes you through the whole history, their wandering, everything that happened and occurred, and brings out all the truths again and all of that. In that desert area, there is also Elim, which has the 70 palm trees and 12 wells of water. There is the smoldering, broken down ruins of the city of Sodom. It was down by the Dead Sea. It is also a three-dimensional maze. There is still smoking, and there is still heat emitting from the remnants of its fiery destruction, using infrared heaters in the blocks. You can feel the heat still emitting. Underneath Sodom is a 120-foot wraparound screen. It's a theater that plays the story out from Abraham and Lot, to Lot going into Sodom, to his exit from it, and then the destruction of Sodom. And the destruction doesn't just happen on this screen. Only the movie portion happens, but the city itself, the lights go off, and the movie goes off, and lights come on, and you see that you are actually in the city, and it gets destroyed around you. Fireballs falling literally from around you in the theater. Heat, again, from emitters. Thunderous booms, explosions, everything happening, and it's just the fire that it gets intense and it gets hotter and hotter. You get to go up to the top of Sinai. There's another theater is in the top of it. You're sitting there waiting for the show to start, and here comes a lamb running around the corner, and it looks at you and lets out one bah, and then it takes off running, and here comes a few more sheep, and then here comes Moses behind the sheep, and he has his whole experience with the burning bush. And he later comes back, children of Israel. They have their murmuring. He smites the rock. All of these things are all played out in front of you on the top of Sinai. What I have given you is a very fast, brief overview of phase 1. There are 4 phases. This is a massive project. And I have not even touched the surface of everything that is there. There are over 100 themed buildings, and the activities are nearly endless. They didn't even get into the playground area, the zip lines, the Mount Carmel where Elijah is, and the prophets of Baal calling down fire. We didn't even get into any of that. But if you went through the entire park and you only took 10 minutes at each activity, that does not include your time for eating or your time for walking there. You took 10 minutes at each activity, it would take you 3 days to go through the entire park. There is so much there. There is so much history there. There is so much to do that it will actually become a destination. This is not something that you just go to. You could go there for an afternoon, but you might only stay in a small portion of Jerusalem or one of the other towns. You won't even get to see nearly all of it. It is very big. The plan has been under development now for about 5 years, like I said. It is very mature. It is nearly ready to hand over to a developer, but it's going to take a massive sum of money. It is not something that we can do. And what we are looking for is eventually someone who will believe in it, who will get it, who will make it happen. And that's all that we can do. All of us combined could not make this happen. You understand that. This is something that is beyond our hands. That's why we are tonight. This is what we call a soft launch. This is the first time it's been revealed. Most of you have never heard of it before. We are letting it out to see what comes of it. And if we can get some funding maybe to take the next step, or if we can get people interested, get them involved. Somebody says, hey, I can do this. I'm experienced at this sort of thing here. It will take a lot of people. And that's kind of why we're letting it out here tonight. But just think about it. I really appreciate the time that you've given us here this evening, and look forward to seeing what will happen with this all. Thank you all.
All of history tells a story, and here you can be a part of it. The pages you've read, the stories you've heard, it's all true. And at this place, it becomes real.
Try that door!
It's locked!